Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. Still not back in the pub. We're out of lockdown in the UK. Vaccines are on the way, but we've not yet returned. Pato, anyway, how's your week been, my friend?
It's good, man. It's absolutely miserable outside, but I'm genuinely quite excited about lockdown being over. I know that really it doesn't make that big a difference, but it feels like a weight's been lifted.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Hamster, how have you been getting on?
I'm just very keen to get this show done, mate, because, we went to do it a couple of hours ago, didn't we? Then someone forgot that they had a driving lesson and their instructor was literally outside their door.
My bad, everybody, my bad. But the lesson went pretty well. I didn't run anybody over, so That's the least I can bring to you. Anyway, this episode is brought to you by Budweiser, the official beer partner of the Premier League. A quick reminder that Kings of the Premier League has returned to Sky Sports, and the panel will be using Sky's power rankings and Budweiser's King of the Match stats to debate each month's MVP. I think the latest episode features Tim Cahill and Bayo Akinfenwa going head to head. But before we get on to it, lads, who's been your King of the Month? Chris, you want to take it first?
Well, I think there's some obvious candidates, isn't there? JWP, Jack Grealish at it again, but I think I said him last month. Seb Allar making a bit of a comeback by Seb Allar's West Ham standards. Mahrez has played well. I'll probably opt for... I'm going to go for out of them. Let me go for Grealish again.
Oh my lord. Pato, who are you going for?
I am actually tempted to go for Edinson Cavani, Like 3 goals and an assist, I think, was it, in the Premier League? But obviously, like, the game-changing player in that comeback against Southampton. I mean, Cavani, we've always said, has still got something. And because he was never that reliant on pace, his strength, his match intelligence are obviously clearly there. But I know that everybody says this about every old striker who ever comes to the Premier League. They're like, it'll be amazing for the young players to learn from him. But given that United have got a bunch of forwards who kind of hover between winger and striker, I genuinely do think that Cavani will help them develop. So I love that he's doing well. I think it's great. And, Cavani's one of those guys who I've always had a bit of a soft spot for. So well done to him.
Yeah, well done, Edinson. I think I'll go Bruno. Just continues to be the main man for Man United, kind of just dragging us to wins at this stage. But anyway, you can click the link in the description below and see if any of us called it correctly. Right, let's crack on with the show, though. The main question that was sent in by a lot of people, it has to be said, but we've picked out Tamish Bahal. He said, who is going to be sacked first, Zidane, Tuchel or Conte? Now, I know that Continental Club on Friday over on EuroFootball Daily did a very special piece on Zinedine Zidane, so we won't maybe focus on him too much, but let's just chat about him first and foremost, very briefly, because he is the outstanding candidate right now across Europe, right, Hamster?
Yeah, I'd say so, and I think it's probably fair as well. Still dining out on that 3-1 victory at the Camp Nou earlier in the season, isn't he? Because his form of late has not been good at all. So was it 3 losses and a draw in their last 5? They sit 4th in La Liga. 7 points now off pace setters Real Sociedad. And I thought, after Sociedad made that great start, that by this point, by match week 12, the big boys would have caught up. But they're fending them off pretty well, doing a great job, aren't they? Now, I think Real Madrid do have a game in hand on 2 teams above them. But then again, Atletico Madrid have a game in hand on them. And they're second. So Atletico Madrid quietly putting together a very solid run at the title. And they couldn't have picked a better year, could they? Diego Simeone's main tactic in terms of winning the league has just been to stick around until Real Madrid or Barcelona crumble, and invariably it happens every 4 or 5 years, doesn't it? So I think he is long overdue one. I had a look at their expected points as well, Real Madrid, just to see if they'd been a little bit unfortunate. Apparently they deserve to be 4th by that metric, and they just haven't been convincing at any point so far this season. It's not like they're even building momentum or getting better. They've only won 2 games by a margin of more than 1 in the league. And the losses have been fairly convincing too. Lost to Alaves, who'd never won at the Bernabeu before. Yeah. And I think the goals were scored by Joselu and Lucas Perez, which pretty much sums it up right now. Ex-West Ham, ex-Newcastle. And that result still wasn't the worst in their campaign. Newly promoted Cadiz, beating them on match day 6. And they're not even a yo-yo club. They're like Blackpool, the English Blackpool. I don't know if they're on the coast or not, but they've literally been in Spain's top tier twice in the last 20 years. So that was a historic loss. And their opening fixtures were pretty easy. They only had two, still yet to play 2 of the top 6. So should probably be in a better position. And the Champions League is normally their saving grace, isn't it? But now they face the very real possibility of dropping into the Europa League for the first time since the competition was reformatted. Yeah, I don't see where Real Madrid's improvement comes from, because Eden Hazard injured again. Benzema been going at a solid rate of knots. I think 4 goal involvements in 8 starts. Has 3 assists as well. So he's doing okay in the league. But Fede Valverde is their second top goal scorer, which points towards a pretty dysfunctional attack. I think the only person taking over 3 shots at the moment at Real Madrid is Karim Benzema. And Vinicius Jr., I believe, is second on around 2.6. So not really proficient going forward. Not sure where the goals are going to come from now. Their last Galacticos signing is injured. I think he's missed about 41 games since he's been there. So a shoe-in for worst signing of the modern era at the moment. And defensively, not much better. Conceded 12 in the league. I think that's the 11th best. And they're conceding almost 11 shots a game, which is very middling in La Liga too. So it's pretty damning at the moment, mate. They only conceded 25 over the course of last season. So yeah, really not good. Marcelo not playing well. A bunch of individual errors from Varane, Ramos, Courtois in recent weeks. So even their more reliable figures not performing. And Sergio Ramos yet to sign a contract extension and could leave in January. So if I was Zidane, part of me would want out, mate.
But are we laying this at Zidane's door? Are we saying this is Zidane's fault? Because I go back to the summer recruitment and it was so bad. Obviously bought nobody in, sold 2 extremely promising fullbacks in Reguilon and Hakimi that I think would probably both be starters at Real Madrid right now. I mean, Lucas Vazquez started at right back, didn't he, against Alaves, which is an absolutely horrifying sight if you're a Real Madrid fan, surely, because he's clearly not a right back. So for me, I think as much the blame kind of has to be laid at the door of Perez as it does as Zidane right now, just because the recruitment was so bad. What do you think, Pat?
Oh, I was just gonna add, Pat. They have posted a 300k profit though, and you look at where Barcelona currently sit, and you can't say that they're not being run, a lot better given the circumstances than their closest rivals. So at least they're in the green. At least they can think about building in the next 1 to 2 years without having to shift players. I will say that. But no, go on. Let's move on to what point you were talking about.
Well, I mean, they've got a lot of assets that they can sell as well. So they should continue to be able to kind of turn a reasonable profit. Like, obviously, we expect they're going to go and try and spend huge amounts of money on Mbappe or maybe Haaland. But they've got guys like Dani Ceballos. They've got Vinicius and Rodrigo. They've obviously got Hazard if they wanted to try and sell him. They've got Luka Jovic. So there are guys on the books that they can shift to offset what is clearly going to be quite a substantial rebuild. I mean, my issue with Zidane's Real Madrid side has always been that essentially there are the guys who defend, which is the backline plus Casemiro, and then there are the guys who attack, and that's the rest of the team. And there's never really been a coherent press there. Last season was really the first season we saw them perform more like a team. And in a way, I feel like Zidane has fallen into the sort of Gary Monk trap, which is that when you overperform with a team, then it sets unrealistic expectations for what you can do. Like, as good as Benzema's been this season, you can't get title-winning performance out of him every single year. And I don't know, maybe he's still got enough clout there to stay in that position. I can't really see why they'd sack him unless they think, right, okay, Pochettino is going to come in and drastically improve us. If the idea was that they weren't going to spend much this summer, they were going to run back the same team and really invest heavily in 2021, then frankly they should have expected not to get better and perhaps to get a little bit worse. So I think if they sack him, it'll probably be a little bit of a misunderstanding of where they are as a squad.
Do you think Pochettino carries this team forward? Because obviously he's been available for so long now on the market, Pochettino. Do you think if he was to come through, looking at this squad, you would see immediate drastic improvement? And I'm talking winning a league from this position, or do you think he would also struggle with the assets they've currently got? Having to play a Vazquez at right back.
I think they'd improve in some ways. I'm not sure if he'd carry this team forward, but I think he'd carry the club forward over the next few years. Like, he'd build a different style. But even when he went to Spurs, the first year they were unbelievably lucky to finish 5th in the league that season. They were pretty bad while everyone was learning their positions and learning their roles, and he was playing a Bentaleb Mason midfield partnership. Like, I think that at Real Madrid it would be a pretty big shock to a lot of their players to find that they had to press in a Pochettino style. And while some of the younger guys like Vinicius, I think, would adapt well to it, and actually Lucas Vazquez, I could imagine being a really useful player under Pochettino. Yeah. I think that it would be quite hard to press with a midfield which still features Toni Kroos and Luka Modric quite prominently. So I think that it would be a progressive hire overall. But if he came in, I'm not sure we'd immediately see an uptick in their performances. I'm not sure that that's possible with the squad as currently constituted.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree. I think that my worry would be for Pochettino is overseeing a transitional period at Real Madrid is the hardest job in world football, because you are demanded to win trophies even within a transitional period. It's not as if he could come in, move some of these past superstars out of the club and then take 1 or 2 seasons to bed players into his way of thinking, maybe finish third a couple of times, get to a couple of Champions League quarter-final. You have to be competing, guaranteeing trophies even in a transitional period. And I think for Poch, there would be the worry for me that he would come in and not be able to enact his style of football, the high press, really straight away, and that could come back and bite him. Do you know what I mean? If I'm trying to, I don't know whether I'm putting myself across right there, but I think that'd be a risky job, in my opinion, for Pochettino, Chris.
It's probably a good time for him to take it, though. You think about the star power that dressing room had 4 or 5 years ago, and I think Perez has successfully diluted that, and that's probably where some of the friction comes with Sergio Ramos as well, right? I mean, they've only won 2 of the last 10 Champions League games without him, and they've already lost as many Champions League games since Ronaldo left them, when Ronaldo was there in 9 years, which I find incredible. So they are missing players of that caliber, of that authority, aren't they? But they have a young, impressionable squad, and that is fertile ground for Mauricio Pochettino. Should they make, a couple big signings, maybe he wouldn't hold the same sway in the changing room. I'm just trying to look at some different things. So I think it's a good time as any for him to take it. I tend to think they won't, though, and that is because of the downturn of Barcelona means that Real Madrid will probably still be in with a title shot, when maybe they're on the balance of things they don't deserve to be in another 12 weeks time.
Yeah, all right. So let's move away from Zidane then. But in a word, do you think Zidane will be sacked before Christmas, Chris?
No.
Pat?
Probably not.
I agree.
I don't know, actually. If they drop to the Europa, right?
Yeah, there is a very real possibility. And it would be the first time in the club's history that they've not made it out of the group stage.
That's got to hurt the ego big time.
God, that would be funny.
But yeah, I agree. I'm going to say no. Let's move on to the next man that was mentioned then, and it's Thomas Tuchel, who we're filming this on Thursday. I think probably just saved his job last night with a very impressive 3-1 away win at Manchester United, because I think if they'd have gone into the Europa League, given a fairly up and down start domestically to this season, he would have been in big trouble. I feel like they've kind of drifted apart a little bit as it is, Tuchel and PSG. Obviously, there was some very high profile and open debate going on between the hierarchy at PSG and Tuchel around the summer transfer business and the players they were bringing in. Then they started the season with 2 losses, I think, in their opening 2 games. In the Champions League, they've looked pretty poor. I thought last night was probably their best performance in this group stage. Obviously got a result in Leipzig as well, but very fortunate on the night to get that result. So if he'd have gone out last night and had have been put into the Europa League, I do believe he would have been sacked. And I think that is probably because, again, we come back to Pochettino, but Pochettino, being ex-PSG, is obviously going to have been lined up. And I just think that Tuchel, like Zidane, has been held out to dry a little bit by the board, because their transfer business has been absolute rubbish over the last 2 seasons. It really has. I mean, the exits of Thiago Silva and Edinson Cavani, I think, have actually hurt them more than they're expecting this season. Cavani, for me, probably would have started for PSG last night. I know that Moise Kean has actually got off the ground pretty well in Paris, but I still would have gone for Cavani. And Thiago Silva looks fantastic at Chelsea as well, so I'm sure they're looking back on those 2 moves with a bit of regret. And then the incomings, Mauro Icardi, that move looks skeptical. I'm skeptical about that at best. Sergi Rico in the summer. Danilo Pereira, who looks about 22 stone at the moment. Don't know what's going on there. Florenzi, yeah, it looks okay. Then last season, Diallo, not a bad signing, but then Idrissi Gueye, Sarabia, and Herrera. They're not the classic names I would be linking to PSG that are going to win us a Champions League. I know they got to the final, won the domestic, I think, treble. But Tuchel's job is reliant on European pedigree. They win the league title domestically every season anyway. He has to massively perform in Europe. And if he'd gone out of the group stage, his job would be gone for me. So I think next Wednesday, it's crucial they go through. That's my opinion. Anyway, because they cannot lose to Istanbul. Do you think he would have got sacked last night, Pat, if he'd have lost?
I don't know. Yeah, I suppose we haven't seen them fail that catastrophically on the European stage. But I will say that, as far as I'm aware, in the entire time that this ownership group have been in charge of PSG, I don't think they've sacked a manager. Like, they've only ever not renewed a manager at the end of a season. And Thomas Tuchel's contract is up at the end of this season. And if you sack them, it's a huge expense in a year when you can ill afford it. And it seems like they are trying to cut down on their investment in PSG, with this kind of limited transfer business, turning that 10 million profit last season. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if they let Tuchel see out the season, regardless of what happens. Emery survived the remontada against Barcelona. Like, he also survived losing the league to Monaco. Like, there have been humiliations in PSG's history, and managers have always been allowed to see out the season. So maybe it's a bit different because Pochettino's available this time, and if they do want him as the next guy, then I suppose they don't stand to lose that much, except money, by hiring him. Though, given the fact that Pochettino's now been a long time out of a job, maybe they can get him at slightly below market rate. I mean, yes, I think that if they go out of the Champions League, given the discord between Leonardo and Tuchel, maybe that does push them over the edge, but nothing has pushed them over the edge before. So it's a difficult call in that sense. And I still think that, there is still a lot of talent in this squad. Like, obviously they did make it to the Champions League final. Neymar, when he's played this season, has at points been the best player in the world. Like, when he has a good game, he is arguably the best player in the world. And I really like that midfield. Like, as much as some of that business is a little bit underwhelming, I think Gueye has overall been a good signing. Sarabia is having a fantastic season right now. Rafinha, unbelievable signing for the money they paid. Like, on the other hand, yeah, guys like Danilo Pereira are pretty demoralizing. So it's a strange one. It's a strange one. But I also kind of feel like Tuchel was always a weird signing for them. Like, I think Tuchel's a fantastic manager, but he's a manager who requires players to buy into a system. And unless you're a guy like Pep Guardiola or Klopp, it's extremely hard to kind of, I guess, have the necessary authority over a changing room full of stars to make them do things that they don't want to do. So, I think that it's always been a bit of an uphill battle for him there. I imagine that he'll leave this summer, and I imagine he'll be much happier going to a mid-level club, like Arsenal, for example, who we might come on to in a bit.
Yeah, I just think that the problem for Tuchel will be that relationship with Leonardo. And I think the public criticism of each other during, I think it was around August sort of time, that immediately worries me. Like, if it comes down to the crunch and they miss out on the Champions League, does Tuchel have Leonardo's backing amongst that board? I don't think he does. And I think even less so when there's a manager like Pochettino who's played for the club previously available. So For me, if Tuchel doesn't get through against Istanbul and Manchester United and Leipzig end up scraping through somehow, I don't even know if that's entirely possible. I think if they draw, it might be actually. Then I don't see him making Christmas. But having said that, PSG probably still favourites to go through this group right now. And if they do, then he'll stay in a job. I think his whole managerial status relies on European football right now, Hamster. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, the worry is that the chasing pack are getting better, right? And Lyon have probably played the best football in France this season. Monaco much improved under Kovac. Rennes continue their ascendancy, although in recent weeks they've blown hot and cold under Julian Stephens. And I think that is probably more unforgivable, or something the PSG board will be more unforgiving of, right? Letting these teams back into the equation. If they find themselves in a title battle come January, February, I could see them, probably going elsewhere. If it looks like they're not going to succeed on any front, I think, like Pat says, you make it to the end of the season as a PSG manager, but only on the understanding that you're going to at least retain the league and title, right? Although I think the only manager that's got a better win percentage than Thomas Tuchel at current, even in the modern era for PSG since they started injecting hundreds of millions of pounds, is Unai Emery. Surprisingly enough, I think Tuchel's at about 75% now, and that shows you how fine the margins are. I think anything other than retaining the title and a quarter-final, semi-final in the Champions League, will probably bring his spell to an end. And I think he'll be quite happy, the big German, to get a couple of league titles under his belt. So, he's not got that hanging around his neck if he wants to progress on to another league. And, I think he might be keen to be free from the project. And it's unclear what the project remains, right? Even with the signings that you mentioned, it feels a little bit muddled. They've got a much more workmanlike side now. It's perhaps a little bit younger, set up better for the next manager. But you have this overwhelming sort of Neymar has this overwhelming responsibility on his shoulders to be the creative sort of tour de force in every big game. So, although I did see against Manchester United a little bit more willingness to adapt to Tuchel's system, right? And they had much better defensive shape in transition. It was more like a 4-1-4-1. Kylian Mbappe was covering his right back on multiple occasions. So there's been a little bit of progression there, which he'll be happy with, no doubt. But I can see it coming to an end quite amicably at the end of the season.
All right, so you're going to end of the season. Let's move on to maybe closer to home then, Pat. With Mikel Arteta, because he's been much talked about over the last few weeks. Arsenal obviously having a pretty rancid November by all accounts. Obviously 14th in the league, 2 wins in the league since September the 19th now. 3 straight defeats at home, 3 goals since the first week of October. Plenty of negative stats. Is it panic stations for Mikel Arteta, do you think?
Probably not, just because of the club's investment in him. Like the club in the summer obviously said, we're going to promote him, he's going to be first team manager rather than head coach. And it does seem like if the club is committed to any part of the current setup, it feels like it's Arteta, like more committed to him than the squad, more committed to him maybe even than Edu. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty bad right now, and he's been quite honest about that, which I suppose is like, a small comfort. It's strange though, because he clearly is a manager like Guardiola or someone like that, where he has this really clear idea of how he wants to play, and I think that puts you, that question we always had of like, how would Guardiola do with like an average club? I think you're kind of seeing that right now with Arteta. Like, I'm not saying he's Guardiola's level. I'm not saying he even necessarily wants to play exactly the same way, but by having this really exacting style that he wants to commit to and not having the players for it, his side are pretty awful. I mean, like they're a lower half of the table team right now, and he's really inhibited the attackers, and I don't know, in a way, like I find I think that what helps him is that he's incredibly good with the press still. Like when he speaks about what he's doing, about how the club is working, he's very good at explaining himself, and he's quite good at, talking about the issues in the side and talking about issues with recruitment. And actually, I think that goes quite a long way because it keeps fans on side. And so long as there's not like huge clamour from the fans for him to be sacked, I think it's easier for the club to keep hold of him. And he said recently, look, we can't press the way I want to because if we do, we don't have the players yet. And Arsenal did try and press more against Wolves and were a bit more exposed as a result. I don't know. I mean, in a way, it feels like there have been steps backward because when he first came in, Arsenal actually put in some pretty decent performances. Like there was the first half of that game against Chelsea. There was the performance against Man United, and Ozil was playing in the side. And even though he wasn't creating a lot, he was stitching the team together, and we were seeing a sort of 4-2-3-1, which seemed to be working quite well. And now it's all. It seems like actually there's been a bit of a step backwards, which is a strange one. So in a way, I feel like he was having more success when he was adjusting his tactics to the personnel at the club rather than trying to force the personnel into this particular scheme of how he wants to play. But if I'm honest, I think a way bigger issue for Arsenal, and Arteta's involved in this, is recruitment. Like a way bigger issue. Like if you sign good players and get good players in the dressing room and fit and on the pitch, management of course matters, but it matters less than that. Like there's only so much you can overperform with a bad team, or underperform with a really good team. And I kind of feel like the transfers made over the last two windows have been far more damaging for the club in the long term than anything Arteta's doing right now or any bad results he's getting right now.
Are you talking about Aubameyang here? You're talking about the Aubameyang contract?
Well, I don't think the Aubameyang contract was a great idea, but no, Willian was much worse than that, right? And signing Cedric when you had Ainsley Maitland-Niles on the bench, and buying Pablo Mari, who hasn't played at all yet, and letting Torreira and Guendouzi go out on loan. These are all very strange short-term signings. And if Arsenal go out and try and get Christian Eriksen in January, unless they get him on a cheap loan, then you will have very clear evidence that this is a club that does not know what it's doing off the pitch at all. And if I'm honest with you, I kind of feel like lots of managers would be doing better because of different styles, or because, they're just better managers than Arteta currently. But I kind of feel that a really good director of football with Arteta might arguably have a higher ceiling than Edu and a really good manager, just because of the way this squad is being built. And I worry that if they continue to build it this way, like continue getting these short-term signings who are, aimed at 1 to 2 years from now rather than 4 to 5 years from now, you're going to end up with a squad that is constantly in a cycle of trying to divest itself of its dead wood. And that is not a way to build a new team. On the other hand, there are positives. Like at the end of the season, David Luiz's contract is up, Ozil's contract is up, Socrates, Mustafi, I think Kolasinac will be gone. Like there are loads of contracts up at the end of the season, and that's going to make the squad vastly younger and free up a huge amount of money from the wage bill. So I think that there are positives, and obviously there's this crop of young players, which is quite exciting. But I don't know. If you ask me to guess, where this team's going to finish right now, I genuinely don't know if I go top half or bottom half of the table, but I'd be inclined to say bottom half.
What do you do, Pat, with the next 50 million if you're replacing Edu? What would you do? What problem would you solve first?
In my view, you've always got to focus on elite attackers above everything else. Like I understand that there are other problems in the squad, but if you have elite attackers, it goes an awfully long way. It really does. And Arsenal don't really have any at the moment. Like Aubameyang is probably still a good striker. I don't think there's any reason that you couldn't get the production out of him that people get out of, say, Vardy or something, but not in this system. So I'd definitely be looking for a real creative player and probably another winger maybe, but it depends what form Martinelli's in when he comes back. I'm still quite hot on Martinelli. To be honest, I just think you've got to focus on players kind of 19 to 23. I mean, maybe 21 to 23, who are young, but obviously old enough to contribute now. So Arsenal have been linked with Eriksen, Szoboszlai and Buendia for the January window. For me, the one I would want to go for out of those three guys is Buendia. Followed by Szoboszlai, probably. I'm not saying Buendia is necessarily going to be a better player over the course of his career, but we know Buendia can put up numbers in the Premier League right now. And that, I think, is the advantage of a guy who's 23 rather than 19. So I kind of would love... If you gave me the choice between replacing like Arteta with... Christ, maybe not Klopp, but maybe like Tuchel or something, or replacing Edu with Rangnick, I would choose replacing Edu with Rangnick. I think that's going to be much better for the long-term health of the club.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I want to come to you actually, Hamster, because I remember back in, I think, late October, we had a bit of a debate on Twitter, and I think you put Arteta as like your sixth best manager in the league. Would you still have him there? Do you think he's being let down by the players, or he's getting it tactically wrong?
Trying to throw me under the bus because of his terrible run of form. No, right.
I mean,
so
partially, because at the time I thought it was a horrible shout, and I still think it's a horrible shout.
It's time to revise it. I think we were on a podcast, weren't we? I think we were doing an extra time podcast, and I think it actually just deviated from me putting Graham Potter into the top 8. Like, I think from a tactical standpoint, Arteta is still very good, and he's shown that in his ability to devise, really creative, effective game plans for one-off games, right? Or games against bigger clubs. I think it would be unfair to expect him to deliver Champions League form right now. I think he's probably owed another couple of windows. I think that's probably what the Arsenal hierarchy sold to him anyway. So I don't think there'll be any rush to sack him because, like Pat said, he went from head coach to manager. I feel like they're on a shared timeline now rather than, expecting him to deliver X, Y, and Z. I would like to think he's going to develop into a top 6 manager. In fact, I'm pretty bullish on the fact I think he will develop into a top 6 manager. Is he there right now in the Premier League? Perhaps not. Probably still top half.
I partially agree with you and partially disagree. I definitely agree with you in the terms I don't think he should be sacked. 100% I would not sack Mikel Arteta. But tactically, I think he's all over the place at the moment. I don't know what he's trying to produce out of this Arsenal team. I watch Arsenal play games and I could not for the life of you tell what type of system they're trying to play. Because even if it is this sort of more solid defensive side that is going to play with 2 DMs and sit quite deep, and maybe at times it's going to be 3 at the back, then I'm expecting at least sort of some sort of counter-attacking tactic, that is going to fly forward when they get the chance. But when I watch them, it's just like they're not even trying to do that. It's almost like they're parking the bus back there, and the outlet is Aubameyang, and he's so isolated by himself up there, he's just losing the ball again. So I don't understand what the tactic is. If it is to defend with this many numbers, then there has to be a better option going forward. And if it shouldn't, in my opinion, be to defend with this many numbers, then there needs to be a more progressive style of play at Arsenal, at least a visible way of scoring goals. Because at the moment, I do not see any way that Arsenal score 2 or 3 goals a game. It doesn't against anyone, not even against Man City and Liverpool. I'm talking against sort of like Aston Villa. I don't see where the goals come from. When they lost, was it 3-1 or 3-0 at home? I couldn't have told you where Arsenal were going to score a goal from. And that is a massive issue for Mikel Arteta. And I know that he doesn't necessarily have the assets going forward, but to not get at least some production out of a forward line that contains Aubameyang, Lacazette, Willian, Saka is a massive worry for me.
Yeah, I think it's quite easy to beat up on them now, though, isn't it? Yeah, Pochettino's Spurs were a bit of a mess in their first full season, as were Pep Guardiola's Manchester City, Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool. I remember after 50-plus games, him having an identical record to Jurgen Klopp, and people, gleefully highlighting as much. You have to give these guys a bit of time, which is not a luxury afforded to managers outside the top maybe 6, 7, maybe sometimes, right? Which is kind of why we circle over them like vultures. But when I've seen Arsenal at their best, Arteta's blueprint has been clear and they have been very good. So I think...
What is it, though? What is that blueprint for you?
I mean, it's very similar to Guardiola ball, isn't it? But maybe with a little bit more... It's a little bit more high risk at the back than recent iterations of Guardiola's Manchester City, because they don't have that distributor that City do in Edison. And their centre-halves aren't as good as, Diaz or Laporte when he's fit. So they do maybe rely on those holding midfielders a little bit more. And then when you're playing with El Neni, when you're playing with Xhaka, that can present problems in itself, kind of, because they don't have the athleticism to get up and down. So I think he deserves one or two more windows. I'm maybe giving him a bit more leeway because when they have played well, I've really enjoyed it. But yeah, it has been, painful in recent weeks. I've not really got any skin in the game, so I'll whichever way it goes, I'll ultimately enjoy.
Yeah, I totally agree, though. I don't think he should be sacked. Pat, how long would you give Mikel Arteta if this vein of form continues before... I know that you were talking about moving Edu on and getting a different sporting director, but the man that ends up paying the price is the manager, right? So how long would you give him if this vein of form continues?
It really depends what sort of progress you start to see. Like if Partey comes back into the side and Arsenal sign a creative midfielder and they're pressing more, I don't necessarily care that much about the results so long as I'm seeing progress on the pitch.
Yeah.
So it's extremely difficult to say. It depends how clear that progress is and whether I can see Arteta building towards something or just steadily getting more and more confused. So I in a way, I don't really find it easy to put a time limit on it. But I suppose it depends who's available as well. Like if Tuchel ends up, say, leaving PSG at the end of the season and you've made no progress, then I would... If there's no progress at the end of the season, I think Arteta would have to be sacked. I'm not sure they would sack him, but they'd have to sack him, and they should definitely sack Edu as well. But I probably wouldn't sack him before that, just because I think Arsenal aren't going anywhere this season. Like, you're not saving the season unless you're in a genuine relegation battle. So, like, I don't see really the point. You might as well give him the whole season and see how it goes.
It kind of boils down to, like, it's like a seminal moment for Arsenal as to whether they, stick with someone and opt for stability or keep churning, through managers in the hope that one of them is going to be their salvation. I would tend to go for the stability option because it feels like you've tried everything else already.
I mean, we've only gone through one manager. It's... To me, the stability should come from a director of football. Like, the director of football should be buying players who fit the way that the club wants to play overall. And I think it's okay to cycle through managers to find the right guy when you know that you've got the right structure behind them. The problem is Arsenal are still looking for a manager to come in and give them that structure, like Wenger. So from that point of view, I agree with you. Like, if your manager is the only thing providing stability, then yeah, you kind of have to stay with a manager and you can't afford to just, cut them and move on to the next guy. But I don't think that is a good way for them to be running it long term. I think their attitude should be there's a person in charge with a vision for how we recruit and a broad vision of how we play, and within that we can try different coaching styles. That to me is a much more sensible way for Arsenal, for a club of Arsenal's means, because Arsenal are a rich club. Like, within Europe, Arsenal are extremely rich, but relative to the very top clubs, like, Arsenal are clearly at least one step below. So they need to be smart about how they hire, and that is by far and away the biggest issue right now. So it kind of depends what they're going to do. I think the stability thing here is essentially covering up the fact that they have really, really ruined their corporate structure overall, I guess.
Yeah, and it's like quite a difficult run of fixtures coming up as well for Mikel Arteta. Like, I think you've got a few easy ones. Obviously, you've got Tottenham this Sunday, which is an absolutely massive game for Arteta. But then it's like Southampton, Everton, Man City, Chelsea. So there are some difficult games coming up for Arteta, and he's not going to have Thomas Partey by the looks of it for any of them. So I think this could be a massive month in his future. But we're all in agreement right now. We're saying no to sacking Arteta.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, they've made the worst start to a Premier League season, so you'd imagine things can only get better. But as we put this out, maybe Harry Kane has fully put the sword to them, and it just becomes untenable in the next few weeks. Yeah, I out of the three that we've mentioned, I can probably see Arteta going first.
Oh, wow, that's a big statement. We've got one more name written down here, Christopher. Big Neil Lennon. Now, we did put out a feature on Scottish football recently. It did do very well, and Celtic are not top of the table. So I suppose he must be in the running, because every time I look at Rangers, they are ridiculous. I've just got the table up in front of me here. 3 goals conceded, 38 scored. I read a statistic the other day. They've scored the most goals of any team in Europe and conceded the least. Absolutely ridiculous. How they conceded 3 goals, and what's going on with Celtic?
Well, it helps that, when you play Celtic, they don't manage to put a shot on target against you in 90 minutes as Rangers. So that's definitely helped them in that regard. But look, it's not that I think Neil Francis Lennon is a bad manager. I just don't think he's good enough to be at Celtic right now.
Do you want him out? Are you Lennon out?
What I will say is, it's only if the right candidate comes along, right? And I don't think there's been a better time to be one of the chasing pack, and I'm talking, UEFA's coefficient here, so a league from, let's say, 8th to 15th. I don't think there's been a better time to go and snare yourself a top-level manager whose reputation has gone wayward, right? So Allegri, Valverde, Jardim, Sarri.
Are you saying Allegri to Celtic here?
No, Spalletti. But these are all title-winning managers that are currently out of a job. Of course, you've got Max Allegri's going to have his pick of the bunch, I imagine, next season, and opted to take a year out, didn't he? Particularly to learn English. He probably got his heart set on a Premier League club. But I actually put together a list, and none of those names featured. That is just to make a wider point that there is managerial talent out there if your manager isn't doing a job. And Neil Lennon, I mean, two victories in his last 10 games is firmly in that category of not doing a job, and he's conceding 2.3 goals a game across those 10 games. And even before those 10 games, this isn't a knee-jerk reaction by Celtic fans. They have been poor for a number of months now. And Rangers did Celtic a massive favour by being awful from January, February onwards, last campaign. Celtic deserved to get smacked in the League Cup final, and Fraser Forster sort of had the game of a lifetime and made a double-digit amount of saves. Probably would have done us a favour if he'd let a couple in, to be perfectly honest, because then I think our board's view of things may have been more realistic. But at the moment, we have a guy in charge who's largely, still deploying the same tactics or running the club in the same way that he did in 2010, 2014. And I think football has just come on leaps and bounds since then. Like, if you're a smaller club in the grand scheme of things, you have to plug that financial disparity with innovation, and Neil Lennon does not do that. I mean, after we got smacked 4-1 by Sparta Prague, he actually told the press that I went through that match with the players, and that is the first time I've done that in a long time. And I was just sat there thinking, what do you mean? Like, is that not systematic? Like, how are those words coming out of your mouth? He also said after we lost by the same scoreline in Prague that we were excellent for 35 minutes because of, 20 minutes of bluster after half time when we conceded 2 or 3 goals. It's all very mediocre stuff, and he's a very safe appointment. This is a guy who's had a 22 win % ratio at Bolton, did an all right job at Hibs. They aren't things that qualify you for the job. He's got the job because of the way he handled himself and the club following the Tony Mowbray fiasco, which was probably the only time Celtic have played worse football than at current since I've been alive, Joe. And there's been a number of results since then that's brought us to this point. It's not just been the last 10 games.
So you're firmly Lennon out. Who are you Celtic in? I've heard Eddie Howe's name linked a few times.
I wouldn't mind Eddie Howe. Like, I think he's got excellent pedigree. He transformed Bournemouth from a League One club who had a transfer embargo, had a points deduction, to a team that finished in the top half of the Premier League, with a regular attendance of 10,500 people. So I do think, his reputation is maybe been unfairly tarnished by his sort of defensive naivety or perceived defensive naivety, and some of those.
I think that'd be a great club for him as well. Yeah. I think that'd be a great club for him.
No, I agree, and it's be a similar. People look at the reparation job that Celtic did for Brendan Rodgers' career, and I think managers will want a little bit more of that, right? So I think there's some interesting picks on the continent. Like De Zerbi's doing really well at Sassuolo, Diego Martinez at Granada, Marcelino is still out of a job. So these are probably the guys below the band that I mentioned before who, I don't think many people would have predicted Brendan Rodgers would have gone to Celtic prior. So maybe you try for one of those guys, but I'd be more than happy with a sort of younger, more ambitious appointment that is just tactically,
You're just begging for Potler.
Advanced. I mean, yeah, Graham, big old pot dog. I'd chop my little finger off on Instagram Live, mate, to get him to the club. Just plays football the way I like it to be played. But I don't think Neil Lennon is a bad manager, like I said, but I think Celtic deserve a better one.
All right, then. Let's move rapidly on from this Neil Lennon chat. Let us know who you think is going to be the first man sacked out of those names in the comments below. One quick fire question before we move on to a personal. This was sent in by Freeans. And they say, what near-miss football team did you most want to succeed? Pato, you want to take us off?
Ooh. I feel like particularly the second time Atletico Madrid made the Champions League final, I really wanted them to smash Real Madrid up. Like I thought they were comfortably the better side in that final. I thought Real Madrid were rubbish. I don't know. I just really wanted them to do it. But also, I don't know if they'd have really got anywhere. But I really wanted Ajax to go through in that semi-final against Spurs when Spurs went to the Champions League final, because I thought that Spurs side was not actually that great. I didn't think it was one of Pochettino's best sides. I mean, as good as they were to make the final in the Champions League, I thought Ajax were better in the Champions League that season. I thought Ajax would have at least made... The final was so boring.
It was.
Even leaving aside the ridiculous penalty that ruined the game. I would just like to have seen Ajax go to it, because Ajax would have played exactly the way they always played. It would have been really fun, really dynamic as a game, which it wasn't at all. And that was such a young side and a Dutch side as well. I wanted them to do it. So that one was a bit of a heartbreaker. But I think everyone wanted Atleti to do it in one of those finals against Real Madrid, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's massively up there for me. I'll go for England in World Cup 2018, I think. It felt like that was like the year that something was happening. Even more so when Trippier's free kick hit the net, and then Kane just didn't square it. So yeah, I think in that moment, that was probably the most I've ever wanted a team to win a game in that World Cup semi-final, and it just wasn't to be. So I'll go for England World Cup 2018. What about you, Chris?
I think that second Atletico Madrid's a really good shout, because that was Fernando Torres playing in that team, right? And I think he said if they'd won that final, he would have retired there and then, and that would have brought his career, full circle and ended on a high. And he started that game, and I remember him having quite a good run that year. His goal involvements were as high as they'd been in the previous 6-7 seasons, so it's nice to see the rebirth of him that year. Kind of coincided with that. The Ghana team that went out of the World Cup when Luis Suarez handballed it. I think Pep Guardiola's Bayern probably deserved to reach a Champions League final. I remember a couple of games against Madrid where they were effectively robbed of a result. So, yeah, one of those.
All right, okay, let's move on to a personal question then. This is a good one from Siva the God, actually. Who was your most played artist on Spotify Wrapped? Of course, Spotify Wrapped, if you don't know what that is, it basically tells you what you listened to, how long you listened to over the course of 2020 on Spotify. Pato, who was your most played artist?
I don't know, man. I haven't looked at it yet.
Oh my God, load your phone up now and go on Spotify.
I can't. I'm shooting on my phone, so it'll end my thing. Hang on. If I pull up the app, I can't apparently. Hang on. Yeah, I can't watch the little thing that tells you who your most played artist is. But in my playlist, I've got like Rayami, I've got Frank Ocean, I've got Grimes, vegan. Yeah, I've got a load of interesting stuff, man.
What about you, Christopher?
Oh Christ, I'm gonna have to pull mine up. Let me have a quick
while you do that, I'll tell you mine. Mine was Artbat. Were mine. But I don't overly listen to loads of music on Spotify. Like I listen to a lot more on like SoundCloud and YouTube than I do Spotify, so I'm not sure it's entirely reliable.
Retro.
But yeah, Artbat was mine. Right. Although I did hear rumours that Zach Jalabs was Justin Bieber. So.
Oh my god. Well, it was Coldplay. It was Coldplay like 3 years ago, wasn't it?
What was yours, Hamster? Let's have a guess. The Maccabees?
No.
It's gonna be like Kasabian or something.
Not Kasabian,
that definitely would have topped it maybe like a year, 18 months ago. They're not really done much recently, have they? So I had Jerry Cinnamon, Camel Fat.
Okay. Camel Fat, go on the boy. I was actually going to say Camel Fat. I thought you
Royal Blood. I had Kamikaze on there as well because I mean, Memories is an absolute tune, by the way. I think I listened to that. You know, it was up there. But obviously editing the Hamza Chowdhury documentary, and he helped me curate the whole soundtrack for that. So definitely would have been a lot nailed through there. And
right, yeah. See.
And that Follow More remix of Gimme Gimme Gimme's in my top 5 as well.
Yeah, I've got Follow More in my top 5 as well.
Yeah, so I have a little bit more dance than I'd have presumed. Drake's up there as well, and Kano, but
I think Drake was in 95% of people that I saw as Spotify Wrapped. Like whether like somewhere in 1 to 5, he's like weaseled his way in just because he features on every track in history.
Heady one.
But yeah,
as well.
all right. So that's it for another week of Sunday Vibes. If you want to get your question answered, make sure you put it in the comments below or send it to us on Twitter. A reminder about Kings of the Premier League returning to Sky Sports. You can find out more about that by clicking the link in the description below. Pat, what was the podcast on this week?
The podcast this week was me and Chris fixing teams in the January transfer window. Like we were talking about Premier League sides that maybe could do with a little upgrade in 1 or 2 areas, and so we were trying to find a striker for Leicester. We found, I think, a forward as well for Brighton. We were looking at a Luca Dean stand-in for Everton. You know, some interesting signings for maybe the mid-level Premier League sides.
All right, there we go. We got anything else explained coming out this weekend that you're on, Hamster?
Well, of course, we've put the Frank Lampard one out last weekend. I think we've got one on Pep Guardiola this weekend. Despite his recent upturn in form, we are questioning whether he deserves a little bit more criticism for his approach in the summer and at the start of this season. But I've got a funny feeling he's going to turn things around.
All right, there we go. Thanks very much for watching, guys. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.